Hey, all right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praises, honor, and glory. Call Haloyim La Yahweh, Ba'ad Shem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the sincere apostles and elders of a great millstone who are my teachers. And peace and salutations to you brothers out there preaching this word in truth and sincerity. This is the brother Gawasap with another lesson. And today, just going to be hopping into how the world is taking up a taunting proverb against America and against Israel. All right, and how the Lord has made these two nations small among the heathen as prophesied in the scriptures, man. And we can see how these things are leading up, man. You see how Israel is drawing America into World War III. We see how the tensions between Iran and the U.S. are increasing. All right, it's escalating, man. And things are about to get a lot worse. You're having the food crisis. You're having the price of living go up. All right, and these people are about to lose their damn minds, man. So we're definitely in the end times. But today I wanted to touch on how these different nations are now taunting America, and it's starting with Iran. All right, and so without further ado, I have this article here. It says Iran says the world has accepted it has defeated the U.S. and other Middle East developments. All right, so we're seeing Iran starting to taunt America, and it's beautiful. All right, because we know that this signifies the end of Esau Edom, the self-proclaimed so-called white man, the one who rules America and the world right now, man. All right, and now that he's being made small among the heathen, all right, these different nations are starting to taunt him. All right, and so it says Iran's president says the world has accepted that it's won the war with the U.S., while France and Saudi Arabia are expected to discuss plans to bypass the Strait of Hormuz, which has been effectively closed since the U.S. and Israel launched a war with Iran nearly 6 months ago. And that's right. And we keep reminding you, but Trump said that this war was only going to last, I believe he said 2 weeks. All right. And it's been 6 months already. And now Iran is taunting America, saying that they have already won the war. All right, that they might as well, go ahead and just accept it since the world already has. All right, and I have that word. I want to grab that word taunt in the etymology real quick, which means to make a smart reply, answer someone with a mocking rejoinder. All right, and so that's pretty much what Iran has been doing uh, against the U.S. because time and time again, Iran has proved that the U.S. is not ready to win the war or to fight a war with Iran. All right, and we see it. Okay, you have a lot of like what's his name? He's come out on a lot of news. Colonel McGregor, if I'm saying his last name right, but pretty much he goes into how the U.S. was not prepared for this war, all right, and the U.S. is not prepared for war against China and Russia, but the Lord is the one that's doing these things. Matter of fact, let me grab this real quick in the book of Proverbs, all right. Let me see. Bear with me, Salakia. Right, the book of Proverbs 21 and verse 1, it says, the king's heart is in the hand of Yahweh as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. And so there you go. So the king's heart is in the hand of the Heavenly Father. And so he's the one that's turning these different nations into this war. All right, and I want to grab another precept just real quick. Let me see. This is the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3 and verse 8. It says, therefore wait ye upon me, saith Adonai Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. So the Heavenly Father's plan is to gather these nations together, all right, which we know to be over there in the so-called Middle East, all right, which is known as the land of Jehoshaphat, or in the Hebrew, Yahweh Shabbat, meaning Yahweh's judgment. All right, because that's where the Lord wants to gather them up. That's his determination, as we just read. All right. And we're seeing that this is actually taking place. You have talks of Turkey, um, Israel having a war. All right. You have talks of China joining the war. You have talks of Russia joining the war. All right. And these things are all, it's escalating into what you're going to know as World War Three, what we're all going to know as World War Three, otherwise known as the third woe in the book of Revelation. All right, when you grab Revelation 11 and verse 14, it tells you that the second woe is past and the third woe cometh quickly. All right, and we see how these things are escalating. It's only been 6 months, but you already have talks of all these countries joining the war. All right, you have Russia threatening the UK. Let me actually see if I can pull that up before we continue. All right. Yeah, it says Russia threatens UK with strikes on military targets over weapons and technology supplies to Ukraine. All right, and so you're already having the third woe on the horizon. All right, and it's only going to grow worse. All right, things are only going to go get worse here. All right, and when I say here, I'm talking about on the earth. All right, yeah, here in America especially, but on the earth things are going to grow a lot worse. All right, you're gonna have men here in Babylon being drafted into the war, being sent over there to be killed. All right, because you are gonna have America do a ground invasion in Iran because they're losing the war of the sea and the war of the air. All right, Iran has been a thorn in America's side these past 6 months. All right, and so let me continue it back in this article, and it says, let's see. Meanwhile, remarks by the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and special envoy for Syria appear to contradict official U.S. position over the Golan Heights, and so that's another thing is America's been caught in lie after lie. All right, Trump has said that they won the war. He said they won the war. Let me actually get the amount of times. Trump has claimed the war was effectively won more than 40 times. These statements were often variations like saying the war was over, nearly over, or already won. All right. Trump said the Iran war was ending 16 times since March. So they've been caught in lie after lie, man. It's actually very yapa to see this devil becoming a fool in the eyes of the globe. Everyone is seeing Trump make a foolery of himself. All right, and so these different nations, they're no longer wanting to work with America like that. You have Canada having tensions with the U.S. All right, you have Spain, Turkey. All right, Pakistan. All these different nations that were once clicked up with America that had some type of agreement, they're now looking at America sideways. All right, and so it says, jumping down, it says Iran's president says the world has accepted that Iran won the war. It says Iranian state media reported Friday that President Mossad Pezeshkian said the war with the U.S. should end since the world has already accepted that Iran has won. Iran sees its control over the strait and not giving in to U.S. demands as a win. It says the entire world approved our victory and the U.S. is hated. He said, according to IRNA news agency, Iran sees its control over the strait and not giving in to U.S. demands as a win. And so there you go, man. Iran is taunting America, man. All right, saying that the world hates the U.S. and that's not a theory. These different nations are starting to hate America. All right, especially these Americans that live here because they see that their government is controlled by a foreign nation. All right, it says the remark came as the Trump administration is touting a crushing financial campaign against Iran, promising an economic D-Day against the country. President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. would be imposing unprecedented level of economic warfare and isolation on Iran, aiming to force its leadership to cave to demands to end its nuclear program and fully reopen the crucial Strait of Hormuz to oil and natural gas tankers and It just came out that idea was actually from BB Yahoo. All right, he came out and said, let me see if I saved it on my X account. I don't want to write as I did. Let's see. It's like, yeah, it doesn't look like I did. Let me see if I can find an article on it though. Netanyahu says U.S. economic measures tighten the siege on Iran. Right, here we go. It says when Netanyahu last visited Washington in late July, his first meeting with President Donald Trump since before the start of the war in February, he said he laid out three options for the U.S. reaching an agreement, a renewed military campaign, or economic pressure. All right, so he's pretty much, what's it called? Gloating that he was the one that gave Trump this idea. All right, so that just goes to show you that the U.S. is Israel's lapdog. All right, and so let me see what else. All right, all right. This is just some more things that are happening in the Middle East, so-called Middle East, should I say? So we'll leave it at there. Let me go ahead and grab this next article that I have for you, all right, which was Israel's global image. Okay, and the reason I have this pulled up, all right, which was I was going to start off in the book of Habakkuk, but let's go ahead and grab it in the Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse. I'll get right to the point in verse 6. It says, shall not all these take up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. And so that's why these different nations, starting with Iran, they're not giving in to America's demands. All right, you have the Pakistan. I think I don't know. It might be their president. Let me see if I have that pulled up. Right, yeah. You have Pakistan that's not agreeing to put sanctions on Iran. All right, let me see if I can grab this. Right, Pakistan says it's not bound by U.S. sanctions on Tehran. All right, so it says Pakistan says it does not consider itself bound by unilateral U.S. sanctions imposed on Iran. Islamabad says disputes over sanctions should be addressed through dialogue and in line with international law. So Pakistan said Thursday that it does not consider itself bound by unilateral U.S. sanctions against Iran, challenging Washington's efforts to increase economic pressure on Tehran. All right, so what? Now their relationship has always been iffy. All right, but this just goes to show you where these countries stand in this war. All right, because everyone knows that Trump is lying about the reason they invaded Iran. All right, everyone knows that Israel is the a puppet master of America. All right, everyone knows that this country is being ran by a bunch of liars, pedophiles, and I'll sum it all up in one word: devils. All right, everyone knows this. All right, they've been taunting America these last 6 months, should I say, just exposing the wickedness of America time after time again. All right, you got these Epstein files, you got the child trafficking that was happening over there in Ukraine. All right, you had America being exposed for going around stealing resources that don't belong to them. All right, time and time again, these things have been happening, man. And it's a beautiful thing to see. All right, because this just goes to show you that we are at the end. All right. And so it says, because thou hast spoiled, Habakkuk 2 and verse 8 again, it says, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. And that's all America has been known for, is violence against the land. All right. And now that these different nations have seen that America isn't the big bad wolf it claims to be, all right, they're starting to taunt America. They're starting to reject the power of America, man. All right. And so now I want to grab this in the book of Obadiah, and I'm going to start at verse 1. Excuse me. And it says, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith how the one Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And they're going to rise up against her in battle because they see that what she's doing is not, what America's doing is not right. You know, these people seeing how America is corrupt. All right, they're seeing how they follow the love, because of their love for money. You know, they're creating all this evil and all this tension around the globe. All right, and so these different nations are going to arise against America in battle and destroy her. All right. And so it says in verse 2, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And that's right. So the Lord is making Edom, all right, small among the heathen, which Edom, all right, runs America. Okay. And not just America, but also the land of Israel. And they call themselves the JEWs. Okay. Or should I say JEWISH? All right, because they're actually not the true people. And you have a lot of people that are coming out and exposing them, man. You have a lot of people referring to Revelation 2 and verse 9. So like, I wanted to grab that word small in Obadiah real quick. Right, here we go. All right, it says, I made thee small among the heathen. That word small is quatan, meaning insignificant, unimportant. All right, young, small. All right, so the Heavenly Father is making America and Israel small among the heathen. All right, and, you know, ultimately it's Edom that's being made small among the heathen. Okay, and so I had looked up Israel's global image, right? And it says Americans' views of Israelis have grown increasingly negative, but views of Palestinians have held fairly steady. It says Americans' views of the Israeli people and government have grown more negative across party lines and age groups, while opinions of Palestinians have held largely steady. It says most people across 36 countries have negative views of Israel and little confidence in Netanyahu. It says majorities in most of the countries we surveyed express an unfavorable view of Israel and little or no confidence in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. All right. And so, you know, you can see how Israel is being made small among the heathen. All right, people are starting not to agree with their lies anymore, man. All right, because they see the genocide that they have been committing, which of course Netanyahu keeps denying. But hey, we know, we see what's up, man. All right, we see how these different nations, not these different nations, Salakia. We see how America and Israel have been being exposed by the Heavenly Father pertaining to Isaiah 47, right? So hey, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful time to be alive. Let me see. I want to try to find one that's updated, but hey, if not, we'll be all right. All right, let me see. I'm just trying to get right to the point. Slakia. All right, we'll just read this AI overview, right? So it says global views of the U.S. have declined under President Donald Trump's second term, with confidence in U.S. leadership falling in many countries, and China now seen as a more positive influence than the U.S. in several surveys. More people in 36 countries surveyed by Pew Research Center now view China more positively than the U.S., and confidence in Chinese President Xi Jinping has surpassed that in Trump. And so it says global perception of America in 2026, declining reputation. The global image of the U.S. has significantly declined during President Donald Trump's second term. Confidence in U.S. leadership has fallen in many countries, with a notable decrease in positive views. Right. And so now is being made small. So America and Israel are being made small at the same time. Why? Because they are ran by the nation of Esau, Edom. All right, so let's read this again back in Obadiah 1 and verse 2 again. It says, and keep in mind in verse 1, it says, what thus saith Yahweh concerning Edom. And so it says, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart had deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? And that's right. So this nation known as Esau, Edom, all right, their pride has deceived them. All right, and we see how Trump's pride has deceived him into thinking that he had global dominance still. All right, he believed that America was still top dog, but this whole time, the Lord has been taking away America's power. All right, and now we're seeing the extent of America's power and how it's not very strong. All right, it's different allies are starting to turn on it. All right, its military is being shown to be weak. All right, it was all just talk that America was the big bad wolf, and that these are the things that are being exposed. All right, and the only way that America can actually win a war, all right, is through their nuclear weapons. All right, which is that's going to happen very soon. We're going to see these different nations and America shoot missiles at each other, man. All right, and these different nations are going to destroy America with 200 million thermonuclear warheads, man. And this is what's coming. All right, and this is all the buildup to America's end, and not just to America, but Esau, Edom in general, the so-called self-proclaimed white man. All right, very soon we're going to see Yahweh Shai return, crack the clouds open, and destroy this place, man. All right, and it's going to be a beautiful thing to see. All right, and Adawan Radazah, we're not only called, but we're chosen, and we get to see these things fall upon our enemies. All right. And so continuing in verse 4, Obadiah 1 and verse 4, it says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahweh. All right. And so it's going to be the Heavenly Father that brings him down. All right. And that being brought down is starting now. All right. The Lord is destroying America economically. All right. Militarily. All right. Spiritually. All right. And physically, man, these people are done. And if you agree with America, well, then you're going to take part of the judgment that's going to come on America as well. All right. And so with that being said, I pray that this lesson was edifying, uplifting of the spirit. All right. Once again, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory. Call Halayim La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai. I pray that this lesson made sense. And hey, until the next time I say,